Welcome back to the DeliveringMore platform. Folks, thank you for viewing and listening morning, afternoon, or evening. We appreciate whenever you take the time to consume the content. As always, if you could hit that subscribe button down below, that's going to help out more than you could ever know. I have another wonderful guest on this week's edition of DeliveringMore. I have co-founder and CCO of Vromo and a great friend, Alan Hickey. It's so great to see you, man. I'm pumped up. I'm actually very excited to have this conversation, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same. It's been a long time coming. Thankfully, our agents could get the paperwork sorted out. The appearance fee has been cleared, and we're going to make it happen today, which is awesome.
Awesome. You said you're out in Ireland right now. Do you got any plans? When are you going to be back in the States?
Yeah, so like this year's been pretty insane. So it's basically 1 week out of every month at least. So we were in Texas for FS Tech there 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago now. So probably next week or the following week, head back out on the long haul, and it's just part and parcel of Vromo now at this stage. We're kind of in the States, as I said, every couple of weeks, mostly me. But to be fair, some of the rest of the team are starting to travel now. So I would say probably first week in November, if I was guessing.
Yeah, it is
Possibly before.
not just you wheeling and dealing these days. You got a crew behind you.
Yeah, we're 40 people now, which is insane. Like when we met first, oh God, I think we were like seven.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like grown arms, legs, teeth, personality. It's kind of like watching a kid growing up. But no, it's super exciting. Great team. A lot of different personalities and characters, which ultimately allow us to start acting like a more mature organization. I wouldn't say fully mature yet. I don't. I think we're still in our teenage years, but definitely growing up. Steady pace growth.
Yeah, I think Deliver that's in the same ballpark. I think we'll probably hit like 40 to 50 by the end of the year. But yeah, I mean, we've been coming up at the same pace, kind of hand in hand. So it's been a great relationship. Just kind of give an overview of Vromo itself and your position out there. Can you speak on that for our viewers real quick?
Yeah, for sure. So we're in the delivery side of food service and food technology. And I say delivery side rather than specifically to use case, because I think what the last 3 years has shown us is delivery has been turned on its head and continues to be so. And disruptors like you guys, but even some of the bigger fleets like DoorDash and Uber just genuinely fundamentally shifting their business model has meant that restaurants and operators are really constantly now looking at how do we iterate our delivery model, and that's where Vromo plays. So we kind of look at ourselves as an all-encompassing delivery management tool. So regardless of whether you're using national third-party fleets like Uber and DoorDash, or if you're using, as I would refine you guys as bespoke delivery partners for like your large orders or catering, or if you're that traditional model and you've got your own drivers, Vromo software basically enables you to make the right call on what driver gets what order every single time. And so, long-winded version, but it's really about driving profitability into delivery, because last 2 years showed anybody can be busy in delivery. Absolutely anybody in off-prem can be busy. Being busy and profitable is a very, very different thing, and that's what Vromo's trying to provide restaurants and operators with the tool to do so.
Yeah, and you guys have been doing an absolutely unbelievable job since we met you and since we've been in a partnership. I do want to kind of go back a few years and get like the history of your involvement and the creation of Vromo itself. And when I was first introduced to the company, I don't quite remember the timeline, but I remember days when this was still We Bring
Mhm.
and then We Dispatch, and then you guys are still kind of doing the last mile logistics portion of things, and then you kind of garnered more attention to the back end software side of things, and like you said, delivery management.
Yeah.
Can you just walk us through the early days and what the transition from We Bring to We Dispatch, and then how do we come to a name like Vromo? What is Vromo?
Well, I tell you, that naming ceremony is one that'll go down in history. But we'll go back down memory lane. So yeah, look, 2015, me and my best mate Sean Murray, we're sitting in an office in Dublin, and Deliveroo had just launched in Ireland, and this was like a big thing, right? So it was a marketplace that was doing delivery. There were branded drivers everywhere, and I suppose like anybody with an entrepreneurial kind of mindset or brain, it was something new, something sexy, something that seemed to be growing exponentially. And myself and Murray sat down and literally tried to crack out a business plan to say, how can we get involved in this? And so where we landed was a delivery service provider, and go out to restaurants initially and say, hey, we'll do your delivery. So like just outsource that HR headache to us. And that was about as refined as it was. Like there wasn't anything else. Our first driver was my kid brother. Our first kind of dispatcher was Sean's cousin. Like it was as, you know, literally rickety tickety embryonic startup as you can get. But we bagged a pretty big contract early doors. So Just Eat, which is now takeaway.com, Grubhub's parent, wanted drivers on the road across Europe. And so we were in Dublin and we bagged a contract there. And that kind of was like tiger by the tail stuff. And they pulled us all over the world. We went Dublin, Northern Ireland, Scotland, New Zealand, Australia. And all of a sudden, we had a team of 55 people. We had thousands of drivers on the platform. We were handling millions of orders a year. And this was like, it's kind of like overnight success. Like within a year and a half, we were raising cash, and we had all this kind of business and momentum. But as an Irish startup, and this is rightly or wrongly, I think most Irish startups will always look towards the US and say, oh, yeah, I'd love to crack that because it's such a huge market. Like, bearing in mind, our entire population is about 6 million. Like, cities are bigger than our entire country. So it's a big draw. And we had gone into New Zealand actually, and our evolution had kind of gone into a couple of weird spaces. So when we began life, we were using a software tool called Toucan, which is a kind of generic off the shelf dispatch tool. But it's good. Like, I mean, you know, for us starting off, Jesus, it's what gave us our leg up. But as soon as you kind of start to grow and refine your model, you realize an off the shelf software like that is probably not going to do you. And so we went out and looked at On Fleet and Get Swift and Bring, and you know, had test accounts with everybody. To this day, you probably still have test accounts with them. But we wanted to kind of own something. And so Sean stumbled across a startup called Spatula in Perth in Australia. And really, really interesting technology. The team down there were, you know, extraordinarily smart guys who had built a very, very interesting tool, but not for our use case. It was originally vehicle tracking software. But between the jigs and the reels, Andrew Walker, who was the CEO of Spatula at the time, myself, Sean, and Andrew mapped out how we could turn what Spatula was into We Dispatch at the time, as you remember. And that was just an internal software tool that we were using. So it wasn't like, you know, anything magic or special. It was, we owned it, we could tweak it, you know, we could bring it to different countries and adapt it for New Zealand versus UK versus Ireland. But when we were in New Zealand, a big QSR chain had said, look, we don't really need you from a services perspective, but give us a look at that software that you're running because it's pretty interesting. And it was honest to God, like light bulb moment. And I suppose like most kind of pivots, we stuttered a little bit. So we were very nervous about turning off the services side of our business. So we then kind of went to a co-branded world where we had We Bring, which is our services end of the business, and then we had We Dispatch, which was our software end of the business. And around that time, we had started to kind of up our fundraising activities, and we raised about 3 million. And Brian Hickey, no relation to me, just very coincidental and fabulous surname. So Brian, who was an ex Just Eater, came in as an investor. And it's interesting when you have a new set of eyes on an issue. We very quickly got to, actually, if we want to go proper global and if we want to scale to the extent that we believe we can, software was the way for us to go. Not necessarily for everybody, but for us to go, because we had this tool. And so yeah, we pitched the board November 2018 to turn off the services side of the business, which was turning over millions of dollars a year. It was a big call. And it was around that time that we had met Aaron, Darian, yourself, and like God, we talked about everything between merger and you guys using the tool, and maybe we were going to be deliver that in Europe, and it was everything was on the table at the time. And then we pitched this kind of pivot, and we said, no, we're going to go software only, and that was the beginning of Vromo. Now the name Vromo was, so myself, Sean, and Brian are in our old office. And as we would typically do, we're brainstorming. I think we might have been having a couple of beers actually at the time, but what we were trying to do was get a word that was unique, that didn't exist before, and we believed that the branding side of Vromo was going to be really important. So giving brands that last mile engagement and ownership, that was going to be really important. But also building a tool that was built for food delivery. And food delivery is interesting because it's the shortest delivery time in the world. Like nothing else is delivered at that speed, at that cadence, at that kind of necessity for quick and on time delivery. So it was speed and promotion, and how were we going to do that? And Sean was like Vroom or something like this, and we were like, oh God, no, that's not for us. And there was another Vroom out there, and then we were thinking promo, and we merged Vroom and promo and came up with Vromo and trademarked it, and away we went, and didn't really look back from there. So yeah, it was not the world's most refined branding exercise, I have to be honest. And look, I think every brand goes through iterations. We've probably changed everything in Vromo from a brand perspective over the last 3 years, except the name, because the name is just something that seems to stick. It seems to resonate well with people, and I think it gave us an identity. It was something new people hadn't really heard before, and once you hear it once and learn how to pronounce it, tends to stick in your brain. And that's what a startup needs to do. Needs to stick in people's brains, and eventually, when they're ready to make the call, they remember who we are.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how as a company pivots, it's almost like you always have to do a new rebranding and like update the colors, possibly update the name. I remember Aaron, John, and I are down at Ohio University at the time. This company in 2013, Deliver That, was called OU Delivery,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
at the time it was simply like a DoorDash or an Uber Eats before those companies were even existed, and we're just taking food from Chipotle to a dorm room or to a library or so on and so forth. And then 2016, they tried to go to other campuses. It became campus delivery because now you're trying to encompass all colleges. And then they get into catering and it becomes Deliver That. So obviously, there's always a caveat is as you pivot, like, do we have to rebrand to help people understand what we're doing now? I think it's very interesting. I do want to go back even a little bit more. And like, as you mentioned, you and Sean kind of being the entrepreneurial spirit behind Vromo. What was your guys' earliest involvement in the restaurant industry? What is that a specific reason you guys were looking at this industry? Or did you guys have early existence in that already?
um not I suppose not in the, oh my God, this is the most interesting founder story of all time. Like I would always kind of say we're slightly different in the tech space from an entrepreneurial guys, myself, Brian, Sean, our whole team, because we didn't look at it from a, we are engineers and software designers that are going to build something for a problem that we think might exist or might develop. We looked at it from the position of, we had worked in kitchens and we order food delivery, and what do we not like about it, and how would we like to experience it differently. And it's really interesting because like some of the anecdotal feedback you get from the users of Ramo is like, God, you're very not software people. Like you don't speak to us like you're software people. You don't talk to us like it's a software product. It's more like consultancy within the business, and actually asking like, what is pissing you off? Like what's annoying you? What is stressing you out on a Friday, and how can we help? And so, I think from my experience, like, yeah, like I had jobs in Pizza Hut in the kitchen. I was a delivery driver, like most people were at some point in their time. Brian worked in kitchens, Sean worked in restaurants and bars, and so we had all kind of seen the other side of the coin. And like restaurants is a stressful old place to be in, especially if you're doing like Friday nights, Saturday nights, Sunday nights, delivery, orders coming in, because it's extraordinarily emotive as a purchase. Like I remember we were onboarding our new engineering team, and trying to get them to understand, like, people don't get upset when your sweater from Nike is 45 minutes late and UPS was meant to be there at 1, but it arrived at 1:45. If you're 45 minutes late for somebody's dinner, I mean, they are literally putting a hit out on you. You have destroyed their evening, and it's visceral. Like, people get really, really angst about it. And I think that's what we tried to solve with Vromo. We were like, how can we lift the veil here? How can we kind of show a much, much more customer centric approach to delivery? And that's not always necessarily improving it. Sometimes it's just giving more information, giving better feed of real time data, letting them know what an ETA is. Like, the world works in mysterious ways. Drivers come late, people get flat tires, it snows, it rains. Like, this is going to happen. Informing customers, though, that it's happening so that they can reset their expectations. That's where we kind of came from, and we were like, we want to kind of solve that piece of the pie, and really make something that's built for this vertical. And that's been one of the toughest and most consistently hard decisions, is not getting dragged into other verticals. So, you know retail, cannabis, pharmaceuticals, convenience. I mean, they all try to emulate food delivery, and it's so easy for us to go in and do that. Basket sizes are harder, people have more margin to play with, it's an easier software deployment, but it isn't that food delivery anxiety problem that we're solving. So we have been belligerently focused on, we are a food delivery vertical software. That's what we're going to play in. That's what we're going to own, and hopefully become the market leader in.
Yeah, it's kind of like a position of was the sayings like good at everything, master of none, or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
something along those lines. So like, yeah, so if you find your hedgehog concept, it's almost better to dive in and go north and south instead of going east and west, getting wider instead going more vertical. So that makes a lot of sense to me. What like you mentioned getting, what did you say, the company Spatula was the
Spatula.
company from
Yeah.
Australia? So you acquire them, you become Vromo, and obviously you're live in Europe.
Mhm.
So how does the transition from Europe and all of that become, now we need to take on the United States? How's that process begin, and then how do we begin? I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe Deliver That was one of the first United States partnerships you guys had, maybe even the very first. So how do those conversations start, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes, it's a good question. I mean, so, like, Deliver That was officially our first. So we would class, like, people in categories. You guys would have been our first kind of major customer, as in, more than a couple of thousand deliveries. It was consistent volume. It was on a multiple state basis. And you guys were the first. Like, how we went into the US was, it's a very kind of, Alan story, if I could put it that way. Like, we had absolutely no right. We did not have a footprint. We had no team based here. We had an extraordinarily tight budget at the time. And as I said, I think when we pivoted from WeBring and WeDispatch to Vromo, we probably scaled down the team to maybe 10 or 11. So we went from like 58 to 10 or 11, and it was core. It was like the leadership team, handful of ops, and a handful of engineers, and that was it. And we really had to go into rebuild mode. So the kind of first endeavor, was reaching out to Aaron and you guys and John. Actually, the first call was with John, and pitched the idea of, could we become the software provider of Delivered That, and we could white label and blah blah blah. And I flew out to Canton to meet with John, Aaron, and a couple of the board members, and that was a success. But then we needed other customers, and so I flew down to Vegas to go to Mertech. And in my absolute naivety, didn't realize Mertech was a big conference that carries a hefty price tag to attend. So no ticket, no access. Rock up to the booth, or rock up to the registration desk, and I was like, I'd like to register. And literally, they started laughing at me in my face. They were like, you haven't got a hope of getting in here. but your hotel's booked for 4 days. I'm in Vegas on my own. And I remember I called my wife and I was like, this is a disaster. Like I have not thought this through. And we were shoestring budget. Like this was our spend for H1. So yeah, just kind of rallied myself and said, right, let's try and get as much out of this. And literally trawled that hotel for 4 days, talking to anybody I could, and met Branded Strategic at it, who later became an investor. Met a couple of people from some big pizza chains, where not all of them signed, but the feedback on the product was just infinitely valuable, and how to pitch it to that segment of the restaurant world in the US, and where their pain points were lying and stuff like that. It's just such a, probably still to this day, one of the most valuable conferences I've gone to. And we came away with two leads. We came away with DoorDash for an overflow engagement, and we came away with Papagino's through DoorDash, but also directly with their head of marketing at the time. And that was it. That was the beginning. We bagged those two. We had use cases. We had test case clients that we could speak to, and we said, okay, we've got something here. And that was 2019. And then COVID hit, and we were in online food delivery management and overflow fleets, and we looked like overnight geniuses. It was like we had a crystal ball, and we were right place, right time. But COVID came with its challenges as well, like remote working, hiring became impossible. Fundraising was a very strange thing to be doing at that time. There was a lot of delayed IPOs. There was successful IPOs, and DoorDash well, not failed, but certainly not as positive an IPO as Deliveroo wanted. It was a really weird 2 year period. But yeah, like that was it. It was chance your arm, put your neck out, be afraid, be not afraid of rejection, because God knows you get more than that than you do success and warm hugs. And just build a network. That we weren't going out looking for clients, we were going out looking for connections and friends and colleagues, and see where that takes us. And to date, it's certainly paid off.
So going back to the period of COVID, kind of, and I like you mentioned, you're going to Las Vegas and you're almost out of desperation selling your software. Like
Mm,
I have to make this happen. I can't go back to Ireland without a result. I
yeah.
imagine, like, probably almost having panic attacks at times about these type of things. But like you mentioned, during COVID, things kind of shifted. And because you're a delivery management software, now people are coming to you. Similar to Deliver That, we were reaching out to restaurant brands. Will you partner with us? Will you partner with us? Will you partner with us? And then COVID hits, and now it's flipped on its head. And these brands are reaching out to Deliver That and
Hmm.
reaching out to Vromo. Will you partner with us? How can we use you? How can we integrate your software? Did you guys see that on your end, where now instead of really having to sell your software, it was now people were reaching out to you and saying, we need something. Are you the service? Can we make it work? How quickly can we integrate?
Um, so yes and no, and I think this is probably the most interesting output from COVID. So if I look back to Vromo as a service offering, say March 2020, it was a software tool designed for delivery service providers like you folks, or MDA members, and self delivery operators. That's what we were, and very much focused on that. And pre COVID, with an awful lot of market research and a lot of conversations, that was the big sway and segment within food delivery. Like that's where you needed to play. But what COVID did was super interesting, because this industry moves in a very strange cadence, but it's repeatable. So it's somewhat predictable once you start to see the pattern, but it's spotting the start of the pattern can be difficult. And the pattern that I've seen, and I would argue is repeatable, is you get your early adopters, and these are the kind of trailblazers that do something different, and people are almost critical and openly critical of what they're doing. And then something shifts in the psyche of the masses, and there is this enormous sway of people who come in behind it and adopt. And then when you have that kind of 60-70% penetration, it evolves. And we have seen this in delivery from the very, very beginning, then websites, then apps, white label, a known channel, marketplace adoption, so the DoorDash, Grubhub, Ubers of this world. And now we're seeing it in delivery. And that's what we saw in COVID. So in COVID, you had every single restaurant on the planet decided, I have to be in off premise. But outside of that, there were very, very little considerations made. It was just, good Lord, get me live because I have to get orders out of my kitchen. Completely understandable, by the way. Like, I get that. The world was in a very dark place and nobody knew how long that darkness was going to maintain for. And so everybody went to third party channels. And that was my comment at the start. Like, everybody got busy, real quick. But then COVID lifted and it was gone or going. And on premise was coming back. But the delivery didn't fall back to like 1-2% of people's revenue line. It was hovering at 25, 30, 35%. And then people started to look at the profitability of that channel and they went, oh my, this is not what we want. Because they had made snapshot decisions. They didn't consider all of the parameters. And so Vromo's in the background looking at this going, we've got to evolve. We've got to change what we're doing here. Self-delivery will always exist in segments of the market. Like, I think your big pizza chains, they're always going to want their own drivers for sure. And not just pizza chains. There are other restaurants that make it work, but everybody wants to control delivery. Everybody wants to know that if I get a Google review after somebody orders my food, that I have some sphere of influence over what that delivery was doing, behaving like, acting like, ETAs, whatever it might be. And so that's what Vromo did for the last 2 years. We literally devoted every shred of available engineering time, sales time, partnership time into building out the Vromo ecosystem. And that is online ordering tools that we can ingest from, it's aggregators that we can ingest from, it's POS systems that we partner with and we can display data in, and it's fleets. So not just the Deliver That's of the world, but Skipkart, Uber, DoorDash. I mean, literally, Vromo arguably probably has the largest coverage in the country at the moment because of the way we've thought about building out fleet and giving restaurants the optionality of who they work with and how they work with. And so that's what COVID did for us. We're kind of seeing, we had a couple of early adopters, brilliant, the trailblazers. Some people were kind of looking at them going, what's going on? And now we're seeing the mass. The masses are moving towards it going, I need more control. And it's interesting when you're having conversations with, super enterprise brands, thousands of sites, and mom and pop, and they're basically saying the same thing. Like, when you start to hear that, you know that something's about to fundamentally change. And I think it's going to change for all the right reasons. Because, I am not a supporter or a proponent of like the marketplace bashing that goes on. And people say, oh, Grubhub this, DoorDash that, Uber this. I'm like, guys, they step change this industry forever. I mean, we are all thankful they're there. Volume is up. Buyer behavior has shifted. It is easier to get food in front of people. This is a good thing. Yeah, for sure. The pendulum probably swung too far over that side, but that's the start of it. I mean, there was no alternative. We didn't know where the middle ground was. And I think now what's happening is people are educating themselves. They're accepting that we're in a new reality and they're saying, okay, how do we work in this new reality? And the pendulum will drift back to center. It always does. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. If you go to an extreme, it's a temporary arrangement. You stay at an extreme, people learn, and then we drift back to center because we're all at the same level of knowledge. And I genuinely believe that's what's happening in delivery. I think we're going to see restaurants take way more control and ownership over that guest experience, supported by the marketplaces, the fleets like you guys, some self-delivery application, and software is going to be at the core of it because I think we've established now that expectations from a customer's point of view is it's got to be pretty slick. It's got to be on time. It's got to be ETA. I've got to be able to track. I've got to be able to flag an issue. Gone are the days of post-its and shouting at drivers to take this pizza. It's a whole digitized process now, and that's where Vromo wants to lead and really wants to, as I said, own that side of the market for sure.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, it's almost just it's always just a matter of transparency, right? Like you said, like the restaurant wants to know if the driver's late, they just want to be able to know when they're going to be there. If the food's late to the customer, they just want an update on when it's going to be there. So being able to provide those nuanced that nuanced information of situational and address those issues. I think is the most important piece of all these softwares and all these providers. In 2022, for Vromo specifically, what restaurant brand or what marketplace or what is the perfect customer who comes to Vromo and says, "Hey, we need this," and you're like, "Oh yeah, we're the perfect fit." Do you have any idea of like where you would just easily slide in and be able to help benefit a brand immediately?
Um, like I'm always conscious of saying yes to everything because I think it makes people a bit nervous and it doesn't feel legit. But like in all honesty, if an order is going out of your kitchen for delivery, we slide in and we fit and we make it better and more profitable. So like I'll use two examples, right? Uh Papa Gino's is one that we talk about a lot, right? And everybody knows about it. One of our kind of first marquee restaurant brands. They run an unbelievably slick operation, very data focused, and I'd love every restaurant to act like that, but we get that not everybody has a Kevin Bentley on their team or a Dina who cares that deeply about the brand. Like not every restaurant is at that scale. But then you've got other restaurants that are never going to hire a driver but are utilizing Drive or utilizing Uber Direct, and in both of those scenarios they come to us asking for the same thing. They say we want more transparency over what's going on. We want to have a data set so we know how to make improvements. And we want to own the customer journey when the food is on the way. It is like completely different ends of the spectrum, totally different use cases. Some have drivers, some don't. But ultimately, those three pain points are unique. So, like, if an order is going out of the kitchen, it's a conversation we should certainly have. And even if it isn't a you're going to start working with Romo, I don't think anybody has ever sat down with us and walked through the demo, talked about their use case, and not walked away saying, "Yeah, that was a beneficial conversation." Because we're hearing it from so many different angles. It's like you become this little well of knowledge when it comes to off-prem and the pain points. And yeah, your use case, specific use case might be slightly different to a burger shop or a Chinese or a pizza shop, but ultimately at the core of it, it's the same headache. And Vromo's obviously trying to solve for that. So yeah, restaurants sending orders out. That's our ideal use case.
Unbelievable. And like you mentioned, I mean, since the fruition of Vromo, the partnerships are just increasing. Almost, I mean, I'm following you guys on LinkedIn, and it's like whoever I do dead serious want to shout out your marketing team. The little graphics and like videos they make are I don't know who does it for you guys, but they're unbelievable. I love like the cars like driving down the little wavy roads, like showing up the new partnerships and stuff. It's sick. I was talking to Jim the other day saying we need to make graphics like you guys. So shout out to your guys marketing team. But
That's I'll give the kudos to Shannon, who is she is the pit bull in the marketing department who gets an awful lot of stuff done and was on her own for a long time. We've a new director of marketing as well, Adriana, who's just recently joined the team. But yeah, we definitely punch above our weight, given the size of the department for sure.
yeah, unbelievable. But I was about to mention, the partnerships nowadays. I mean, we got Olo. I think last week we just signed with Toast. What are those big marketplaces utilizing Vromo for now? Is it just like you said, the back end transparency, or how are those companies actually utilizing your guys' software?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, and I think the best way to answer it is to probably give you the honest and straightforward view of the world according to Vromo, right? So you're not going to hear a lot of software say this. We are not the most important thing in the world, right? And that is not why people engage with Vromo. We play part of a tech journey, and in a restaurant's world, there will always be a core tech stack. So sometimes it's their online ordering tool, like an Olo. Uh, Often it's their POS system because it touches an awful lot of the parts of the business. And so when we looked at how do we become prolific in the market, we realized that we have to be able to play second fiddle to that core tech stack as often as we can. And so we went out and we genuinely cherry picked who we wanted to try and get in front of. And it's not overnight success. Like I was on a panel with Toast and Square earlier in the year. And so Brian Solar is the GM of restaurants in Square, and Dave Altman was the kind of equivalent over at Toast. And like those guys will tell you, we went through the ringer to get that partnership. Like the tech due diligence, the operational due diligence, the how we have to structure our contract, our data, everything like that. It's grueling, but it's worth it because they put in all that invisible investment for the restaurant partners. And so why they're partnering with us and where we fit in the ecosystem is they're smart operators, right? You don't get to 40, 50,000 sites not knowing where this market is trending. And they see this as being one of the, I won't say pillars of the business moving forward, but it's certainly an area of immediate concern because of the lack of control. And so across the board, they're seeking partnerships or integrations where they can offer their estate more control, more transparency. And like everything else, like it's the same as when you go into a restaurant, when you go into a tech company, they have their skill set. Toast make an awesome POS tool. They are fantastic at payments, as are Square. That is their core use case. That's where they're masters. And so what is the point in them trying to engineer against someone like us when all it is we think about is that 25-minute trip at the end of the customer, at the order journey, and the start of the customer journey. So that's our core competency. And the partners that we've engaged with see that and give that recognition of this is really good. It's really good at the level we want it to be really good at. And so we're going to tie this in super tight to what's already in play for restaurants so that when they're ready to take that next step, Vromo's there and can be turned on straight away. And liken that conversation to what we do when we go into restaurants. Like catering is something that I always use. Like a restaurant is brilliant at making food. Like they are fantastic at creating a tasty product that smells good, looks good. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be experts at delivering 800 burritos to an office campus. That is an entirely different skill set. And so I think restaurant operators beat themselves up a little bit too much trying to be, as you said, jack of all traits when they are master of one. They are masters at making that food. So like I'm always saying, go and find the outsourced provider that allows you to kick ass in all aspects of your business. And once you find them, then it just becomes a costing. Like finding them is the difficult bit or making that shift. The same with the tech companies looking for partnerships like us. Finding us is the difficult bit. When they find us, then it just becomes a how do we contract this? How do we get it all to work together? So it's the same. I know it's very, very obscure, but like restaurants, tech companies, partnerships, third party providers, same fundamental concept. Find somebody who's good in that lane, pick them, and then work out how it ties into the rest of the business. And I think that's where our partnerships have been coming so thick and so fast because we're solving a very, very specific problem that a lot of people have and a lot of tech platforms have as well.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely no doubt about any of what you just said, man. 100%. I got one last question for you. And I think it's pretty general, but I think you're a good guy to ask about it. We're 2022 right now. Obviously, the food delivery business. I mean, it's only scaling. At this point, almost exponentially every year. So 2030, 2040, 2050. How far in the future are you guys working on your end, and what's your vision for 10 years down the line? Do you have any sort of premonition on what this delivery service world will look like?
Um, yeah, so thankfully, Vroma makes super smart decisions on this because we all have a slightly different view of the world. So if you ask Brian or Hardeep or Porik on our team what their view is, I would imagine it's going to be slightly different to mine, which is a good thing because that means we all kind of land on something from a collective standpoint. Like specifically for me, if I was looking at trends, I think let's break down that timeline. So next 5 years, I think the amount of consolidation that's going to occur in the market is going to be staggering. It is unbelievably disparate and not all at the same level, which is a very dangerous space for operators to be in because right now you've got online ordering, you've got aggregation, you've got POS, you've got delivery management, and the levels between some of these providers are absolutely like enormous. So operators think I've got a good online ordering tool when in actual fact they don't, or think I've got a good POS when in actual fact they don't. So I think consolidation is going to be the single biggest player in the next 5 years. We're going to see the level of tech companies fall, but the quality of tech offered rise significantly. Um, on the fleet side, I'm not so sure. I think competition is going to be something that needs to be protected and maintained. So I don't think we're going to see the same level of consolidation on the fleet side. Yeah, probably some of the smaller providers will get hoovered up or merge or whatever, but the Ubers, DoorDashes of the world, I think will always kind of have our multiple dominant players. The next 10 years, say from there, I think buyer behavior is only going one way. I think Web 3.0 is going to be a big, big opportunity for restaurants. I think digital restaurant fronts on a whole different level, like in-game ordering, in platform ordering, I think is going to be absolutely enormous. And I would be really interested to talk to anybody in the startup world who's thinking that way as well, because I just think that's going to explode. Um, and then drones. I mean, autonomous vehicles is going to shake up the driver side of the world massively, but it won't happen for the next 5 years or so because of legislation, because of everything else. But certainly after that, I think you're going to see autonomous vehicles and drones playing a huge part. So yeah, thereafter, I mean, who knows? It's a wild, wild world after that. But from Vromo's perspective, we very much think in kind of 5 year chunks. And our plan right now, as I look at us we're about to go into our fourth year of say our first five, and our first 5 years was very much around building a product that's as deployable at enterprise level as it is at mom and pop. Really understanding use cases and making sure that we had service offerings that was deployable across the board, staying true to our food vertical and really building out that ecosystem and that partner network. And I think we've done a really good job of that over the last 3.5, 4 years. Next 5 years is converting the masses for sure. And I would argue that starts now. We aren't wed to a 5 year timeline. I'd say that that probably has already started, and we're going to see more and more brands take ownership, get comfortable with data, and start making some really, really smart decisions to drive profitability back into off-prem.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I mean, I know you're a traveling man, like you said. So let's let the people know here, maybe who want to have an introduction to Vromo and the software and everything like that. Are you going to be at any conferences back in the U.S.? Anything going on in Europe where the people can find you? Where can they see you? Social tags, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be publishing our event schedule over the next couple of weeks for 2023. We're going to be hitting up a lot of events. So we'll be in the US certainly once a month. We're hiring out our team in the US as well. So we're going to have boots on the ground probably, hopefully by the end of December. So it'll be much easier to meet face to face with the promo team towards the end of this year. And then, as I say to everybody, I am a talker. So, hit me with a DM, give me a call, we'll jump on a Zoom. It could be a conversation for deployment today or a conversation for deployment in 2 years. But I never tire talking to people in this industry and hopefully bring a bit of value to it. So check out the website, vromo.io. That's got links to all of our social channels. And yeah, if it's engineering specific, sales specific, operation specific, you'll find the whole team on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, man, seeing a familiar face that you don't get to see as often as you'd like, it's always great, man. I love talking to you. I genuinely feel like, when we first met, I felt like I knew this guy for, a good portion of my life, almost my whole life. So I think we obviously hit it off right away. Had some great times at those conferences, and hopes to see you at the future and keep this thing going, man. So
For
thank you
sure.
for joining me today, and we'll let the public do what they do and review the conversation and go from there, man.
Ben, thanks for having me, and love to all the boys over at Deliver That. Looking forward to the next round of beers.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.
Later, dude.